Welcome to the Honeyed Leaf, where every cup of tea comes with a story. I'm so glad you're here. If you enjoy gentle mysteries that help you sleep, please subscribe so you never miss a visit to Willowbrook. Tonight, we're returning to the peaceful village, where Clara Whitmore is about to find herself drawn into another gentle mystery. Before we begin, find a comfortable position, close your eyes if you'd like, and let yourself relax. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Just let the story carry you peacefully towards sleep. Now, let's visit Willowbrook together. Chapter 1. The bells begin. New Year's Day arrived in Willowbrook with crisp, clear weather and a sense of fresh beginnings. Clara had stayed up until midnight to welcome the new year, then gone to bed feeling hopeful and peaceful. The village was quiet, most residents sleeping off their celebrations or nursing mild hangovers from modest New Year's Eve parties. On the morning of January 2nd, Mrs. Pembroke came into the Honeyed Leaf looking puzzled. "Did you hear the church bells last night? At midnight?" "On New Year's Eve? Of course," Clara said. "They rang at midnight to welcome the new year." "No, not New Year's Eve. Last night, January 1st, at midnight exactly." Clara thought about this. She'd been asleep by midnight last night. "I didn't hear them, are you sure?" "Quite sure, they woke me. But it wasn't the usual pattern. It was odd, specific, like someone was ringing them in a particular sequence." "Could it have been Reverend Peters? Perhaps a late New Year's celebration?" Mrs. Pembroke shook her head. "I called him this morning. He didn't ring them. He said the bell tower was locked and no one should have access." That was strange. St. Mary's church bells were old and manually operated. Someone would have had to physically go into the bell tower and ring them. If it wasn't Reverend Peters, who had done it? Throughout the day, several other customers mentioned hearing the bells. They all agreed, midnight exactly, unusual pattern, not the typical ringing. But no one knew who had done it or why. That evening, Clara decided to stay up and listen. Sure enough, at precisely midnight the church bells rang. Not a simple toll or the usual call to worship. A specific pattern. 3 short rings, 2 long, 1 short. Pause, 4 short. 1 long pause, 3 short. Then silence. Clara listened intently, trying to memorize the pattern. It definitely seemed intentional, like a code or message. But what did it mean? And who was ringing the bells? The next morning, January 3rd, Clara went to St. Mary's to speak with Reverend Peters. She found him in his office looking concerned. "Clara, I'm glad you're here. This bell situation is becoming quite mysterious. They rang again last night at midnight, correct?" "They did. I heard them. The same pattern as the night before, I think." "Did you check the bell tower?" "I did. First thing this morning. The door was locked from the outside just as I'd left it. No signs of forced entry. No one should be able to get in. I'm the only one with a key apart from Mr. Davies, our caretaker, and he swears he hasn't touched the bells." "Could someone have made a copy of the key?" Clara asked. "I suppose it's possible. But who? And why ring the bells in this strange pattern every night at midnight?" They went to examine the bell tower together. Reverend Peters unlocked the heavy wooden door and they climbed the narrow stone stairs. The bell tower was dusty and seemingly undisturbed. "No obvious footprints," Clara observed, though the stone floor wouldn't show them easily. "Exactly what I thought this morning," Reverend Peters said. "It's baffling. The bells are definitely ringing. Half the village hears them, but I can't determine how anyone is accessing the tower." They examined the bells themselves, large bronze bells that required considerable strength to ring. Could they be ringing themselves somehow? A malfunction, Clara suggested. "Bells this old don't have any mechanical or electronic components," Reverend Peters explained. "They're purely manual. Someone has to pull these ropes to ring them. There's no other way." "Then we have a mystery," Clara said. "Someone is getting into this tower, ringing the bells in a specific pattern, and being very careful about evidence." That evening, Clara organised a watch. She, Mrs. Pembroke and Eleanor Hartwell positioned themselves where they could see the church clearly. They watched from 11:30 until 12:30. At exactly midnight, the bells rang, the same pattern, 3 short, 2 long, 1 short, pause, 4 short, 1 long, pause, 3 short. But they saw nothing. No lights in the bell tower, no figures approaching the church, no movement at all. The bells rang as if by themselves. Afterward, they went to check the tower. Still locked, no obvious signs of entry. "This is very peculiar," Eleanor said. "Someone must have access we don't know about." "Or a way in we haven't discovered," Mrs. Pembroke added. Word spread quickly through the village. The mysterious midnight bells became the main topic of conversation. Everyone had theories. A prank by clever teenagers, someone with lock-picking skills, an old access point no one remembered. But none of the theories could be proven. The bells were manual, the tower was locked, yet the ringing continued. On January 5th, old Tom Fletcher came to the Honeyed Leaf with an observation. "I used to work in communications during the war. That pattern the bells are ringing, it reminds me of Morse code, dots and dashes, short and long signals." Clara felt a surge of excitement. Morse code? Could the bells be sending a message? Possibly. Though I'd need to hear them properly to translate. My hearing isn't what it was. That night, Clara recorded the bells on her phone. The next morning, she and Tom listened to the recording repeatedly. Tom wrote down the pattern, translating short rings to dots and long rings to dashes. After an hour of work, he had something. "If this is Morse code, the message says hello. Just that one word, hello." "Someone is using the church bells to say hello," Clara asked. "Why? To whom?" "That I can't tell you, but I'm fairly certain this is Morse code. And if they're sending hello one night, they might send other messages on other nights." Clara and Tom decided to record the bells each night and translate the patterns. On January 6th, the bells rang a different pattern. Tom translated it, "Happy New Year." On January 7th, "Hope you're well." On January 8th, "Miss Talking." Each night, a different short message. Someone was communicating through the bells. But with whom? The mystery deepened. Who had access to the bell tower? Who knew Morse code well enough to ring these messages? And who were they sending the messages to? Clara made a list of possible suspects. Mr. Davies, the church caretaker, had a key. He was in his 40s, strong enough to ring bells, but he seemed genuinely puzzled when questioned. Reverend Peters had a key, but he seemed truly confused by the situation. Several village residents had military backgrounds and might know Morse code. Tom Fletcher, for instance. But Tom was helping decode the messages. Why would he do that if he was the sender? Several teenagers in the village were tech-savvy and clever. Could this be an elaborate prank? The bell ringing continued every night. Each message was short, friendly, conversational. Beautiful day today. Working hard. Thinking of home. They felt like messages to someone far away. But who? And why in secret? Why through church bells in the middle of the night? On January 10th, something interesting happened. After the midnight bells rang their usual message, there was a 15-minute pause. Then the bells rang again with a different pattern. Tom translated both messages. Midnight. "How are you?" 12:15. "Good. You?" "Someone is responding," Clara exclaimed. "There are 2 people communicating through the bells." This changed everything. It wasn't just one person sending messages into the void. 2 people were having a conversation through Morse code bell patterns. But how? Were they both accessing the bell tower at different times? That seemed impossible without being caught. Over the next several nights, the pattern continued. Midnight message, then a response at 12:15. The conversations were simple but warm. "Miss you. Miss you too. Learning new things. Tell me more. Counting days. Me too." It felt like people separated by distance, staying connected through this unusual method. But Clara and the others couldn't figure out who was doing this, or how they were managing it without anyone seeing them enter the tower. On January 13th, a new clue emerged. Young Danny Morrison, who'd been part of the ice-keeping crew, came to the Honeyed Leaf. "Clara, I think I saw something last night. I couldn't sleep and I was looking out my window around midnight. I saw a light, just for a moment, in the church. In the bell tower. No, lower, in one of the church windows, like someone with a flashlight moving around inside. But when I looked again, it was gone. Did you see anyone leave the church? No, but I only watched for a few minutes. Then I went back to bed. A light inside the church, not the bell tower. That was interesting. Clara organised another watch for that evening, this time focusing on all the church windows, not just the tower. At midnight, the bells rang their message, and Mrs. Pembroke, watching from a different angle, saw something. There! A light! Moving in the church! They hurried to the church and found the main door unlocked. Inside, they moved quietly, following the direction of the light Mrs. Pembroke had seen. They heard sounds, footsteps, movement. Someone was definitely here. Clara called out, "Hello! We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to understand what's happening." Silence. Then slowly a figure emerged from the shadows. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, holding a flashlight. She looked nervous, but not frightened. "I suppose you've caught me," she said. "I'm Sarah Davies. I'm the one who's been ringing the bells." "Mr. Davies' daughter?" Eleanor asked. "Yes, my father doesn't know I've been doing this. Please don't tell him." "We need to understand why," Clara said gently. "Why are you ringing the church bells at midnight in Morse code?" Sarah hesitated, then sighed. "It's complicated. Can we sit down? I'll explain everything." They moved to the church pews and sat. Sarah set down her flashlight and began her story. "I'm not just ringing the bells, I'm communicating with someone. My boyfriend, actually. His name is James. He's in the Navy, stationed on a ship in the Mediterranean. We've been together for 3 years. He proposed before he deployed 6 months ago." "Congratulations," Mrs. Pembroke said warmly. "But what does this have to do with the bells? James and I have been looking for ways to stay connected while he's away. Phone calls are expensive and difficult with his schedule. Internet is spotty on the ship. Letters take weeks. So we started joking about finding creative ways to communicate. That's when James remembered he'd learned Morse code in the Navy. He asked if I could learn it too, so I did. We practiced for months before he deployed, sending each other messages in Morse code. It became our private language. And then James had an idea. His ship has a bell. All ships do. What if we communicated through bells? He'd ring the ship's bell in patterns at a specific time each night. I'd ring church bells in response. It seemed romantic and adventurous, like something out of a novel. So I asked my father if I could borrow his key to the bell tower. I told him I was interested in bell ringing as a hobby. He gave me a copy of the key. And for the past 2 weeks, I've been coming here at midnight to ring messages to James. He rings the ship's bell at 8 p.m. his time, which is midnight here. Then, 15 minutes later, I ring my response. We're having conversations across thousands of miles through Morse code and bells. Clara was charmed by this. "That's actually quite romantic. But Sarah, why didn't you ask permission? Reverend Peters would probably have said yes if you'd explained." "I know, but I was embarrassed. It seemed so silly. A grown woman sneaking into a church to ring bells in code to her boyfriend. People would think I was ridiculous, so I did it secretly." "People don't think it's ridiculous," Eleanor said. "They think it's mysterious and intriguing. Half the village has been trying to solve this puzzle. We thought it might be something important or even supernatural, but it's actually a love story. That's lovely." "You're not angry?" Sarah asked. "Or going to report me?" "We're not angry," Clara assured her. "But you should talk to Reverend Peters, explain what you're doing and ask for proper permission. I think he'll understand. And Sarah, when does James return?" "May, 4 more months. We're getting married in June." "Then we have 4 more months of mysterious midnight bells," Mrs. Pembroke said with a smile. "How wonderful." Chapter 2. Complications arise. The next morning, Clara, Mrs. Pembroke and Eleanor met with Sarah and Reverend Peters. Sarah explained everything: her engagement, James's deployment, their creative communication method. Reverend Peters listened thoughtfully, then smiled. "Sarah, this is one of the most romantic things I've heard in years. Of course you have permission to use the bells." "Really?" Sarah looked relieved. "Really, though I'd appreciate it if you'd be more careful about locking up afterward. We can't have the church left unsecured. I will, I promise. Thank you so much. There's just one thing, Reverend Peters said. The village is very curious about these bells. Word has spread. People are investigating, creating theories. What would you like us to tell them? Sarah thought about this. Could we keep it private for now? I know people are curious, but I'd rather not be the centre of attention. Maybe you could tell them it's been resolved, that it was someone with permission doing something harmless, without giving details. We can try, Clara said. Though you know how villages are, people will want answers. Over the next few days, Clara, Mrs. Pembroke and Eleanor spread the word carefully. The bell mystery has been solved. It was someone with permission using the bells for a private project. Nothing sinister or concerning. But this vague explanation only increased curiosity. People wanted details. Who was ringing the bells? Why? For what project? Rumours multiplied. Some said it was a government communication test. Others claimed it was an art installation. A few insisted it must be something supernatural that the church was covering up. The speculation became more elaborate as people filled in the blanks with their imaginations. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her nightly communications with James, unaware of the growing village obsession with the bells. On January 20th, things got more complicated. A reporter from the regional newspaper arrived in Willowbrook. I've heard about your mysterious bells. Our readers love a good mystery. I'd like to write a story. Reverend Peters tried to discourage her. It's really nothing newsworthy, just someone using the bells with permission. But who? And for what? Come on, Reverend, give me something. Mysterious midnight bells ringing in code? That's a great story. When the Reverend refused to elaborate, the reporter started interviewing villagers. People shared their theories enthusiastically. Tom Fletcher mentioned the Morse code angle. Danny talked about seeing mysterious lights in the church. The reporter took copious notes. Clara realised they had a problem. If the reporter published a story about mysterious Morse code bells, it might draw unwanted attention. More reporters, curiosity seekers, people trying to solve the mystery. Sarah's privacy would be impossible to maintain. She called an emergency meeting. Clara, Mrs. Pembroke, Eleanor, Reverend Peters and Sarah. A reporter is investigating, Clara explained. She's planning a story. Sarah, I think you have two choices. Either we find a way to discourage the story completely, or you go public with the real explanation before the reporter can publish speculation. I don't want to go public, Sarah said. This is private between me and James. I understand. But if we don't give the reporter the real story, she'll publish something based on rumours and theories. That might be worse. They debated options. Could they convince the reporter not to run the story? Unlikely. It was too interesting. Could they give her a different story that was true but less personal? They couldn't think of one. Could Sarah ask James if he'd be okay with going public? Let me send him a message tonight, Sarah said. I'll explain the situation and see what he thinks. That night, Sarah's message was longer than usual. Over several minutes of bell ringing, she explained about the reporter and asked for James's opinion. His response came 15 minutes later, also longer than usual. Tom helped Sarah translate it. James's message said, "Your decision. I support you. Bells are our story. Share if you want." Sarah thought about this. Maybe it would be okay to tell the story. Maybe it's actually kind of nice that people are interested. James and I aren't doing anything wrong. We're just two people in love finding a creative way to stay connected. If you're comfortable sharing, I think people would find it beautiful, Clara said. But only if you're sure. I'm sure. Let's tell the reporter the truth. But could we ask her to respect our privacy after the story runs? Not to bother James's family or make this into ongoing news. We can certainly request that, Reverend Peters said. The next day, they met with the reporter and told her everything. Sarah explained about James, about their engagement, about learning Morse code, about the nightly bell conversations. The reporter was enchanted. This is even better than I imagined. A modern love story using ancient communication methods. This is beautiful. I'd like to interview you properly, Sarah. Get details about how you two met, about the proposal, about learning Morse code. And I'd love photos. You at the bells, your engagement ring, maybe a picture of James if you have one. Sarah agreed, warming to the idea. The reporter was respectful and genuinely interested, not sensationalist. The story ran a week later with the headline, "Love Rings True. Couple communicates through Morse code bells across thousands of miles." It was beautifully written, focusing on Sarah and James's romance, their creative solution to staying connected, and the community's support once they learned the truth. The story included Sarah's hope that James would return safely and their planned June wedding. Response to the article was overwhelming. People across the country were charmed by the story. Sarah received dozens of letters from readers, other military couples, people in long-distance relationships, elderly couples remembering their own creative courtships. The bells became famous. Tourists started visiting Willowbrook specifically to see the church where the bell messages were sent. Sarah found herself unexpectedly celebrated. She was invited to speak at schools about creative communication and maintaining long-distance relationships. A wedding magazine asked to feature her upcoming wedding. A radio program wanted to interview her and James when he returned. It was overwhelming but mostly positive. The village rallied around her, protective and proud. The honeyed leaf became a gathering place for discussion about the bells. Clara served tea while people shared their thoughts. Some found the story incredibly romantic. Others shared their own long-distance relationship experiences. A few elderly villagers remembered using Morse code during wartime and taught younger residents the basics. In early February, the story took an unexpected turn. Sarah received a message through official naval channels. James's commanding officer had learned about the bell communications. At first, Sarah worried James was in trouble, but the message was actually commendatory. The Navy appreciated the positive publicity and James's creative morale-boosting method. Chapter 3. Spreading Impact. In mid-February, Sarah received an email from another Navy spouse. "I read your story. My husband is deployed too. We've been struggling with communication. Your idea inspired me. His ship also has a bell, and I found a church near our home willing to let me use their bells. We're going to try your method. Thank you for sharing your story." Over the following weeks, Sarah heard from more military couples wanting to try bell communication. Churches near naval bases were being contacted by spouses asking about bell access. What had started as one couple's private communication method was becoming a movement. Sarah was both thrilled and amazed. "I never imagined this would spread," she told Clara. "But it makes sense, doesn't it? Military families need creative ways to stay connected. And there's something special about bells. They're traditional, meaningful, romantic. This gives people a way to feel close even across great distances." A military family support organisation contacted Sarah. They wanted to create a formal programme, connecting deployed service members with their families through coordinated bell ringing. They'd teach Morse code, arrange church access, schedule ringing times. They asked if Sarah would be willing to help develop it. She agreed enthusiastically. By March, Bell Communications for Military Families was officially launched. Churches across the UK and near US bases abroad participated. Dozens of couples were now communicating through bells in Morse code. The programme provided training in Morse code, coordinated schedules across time zones, and arranged church access. Sarah became a volunteer coordinator. The programme attracted media attention. Sarah did several interviews explaining how it worked and why it mattered. She always emphasised that the bells weren't replacing modern communication. Phones and internet were still primary. But the bells added something special, a ritual, a romantic gesture, a tangible connection during difficult separations. In Willowbrook, the midnight bells continued. Everyone now knew what they represented. Sarah's messages to James, a couple counting down days until reunion. The bells had gone from mysterious to meaningful. People would pause when they heard the midnight ringing, thinking about Sarah and James, about love across distance, about creative persistence. Mrs. Pembroke started a tradition. Every night at midnight, she'd brew a cup of tea and think good thoughts for Sarah and James and all the couples separated by military service. Others joined her habit. The midnight bells became a village moment of collective well-wishing, a reminder that even in sleep, the community cared about its members. In late March, Sarah received special news. James's deployment was being cut short by 2 weeks. He'd be home in mid-April instead of May. Supply issues and scheduling changes, the Navy explained. But Sarah didn't care about the reasons. James was coming home earlier. They'd have extra time together before the wedding. That night's bell message was joyful. Coming home early. James's response, counting hours, not days now. The village celebrated with Sarah. Lily at Midnight Baker made special engagement cookies. The bookshop created a display of military romance novels. Even the post office put up a Welcome Home James sign weeks in advance. As April approached, Sarah faced a decision. Once James is home, the midnight bells will stop. That makes me a bit sad. They've become such a part of my routine, of the village's rhythm. Should we do something special for the final bell message? Mark the end of this chapter. Clara thought this was a lovely idea. What if we invited the whole village to listen on the final night? Make it a community event? I love that, Sarah agreed. They planned for April 15th, the night before James's return flight landed. The village would gather near the church at midnight to hear the final bell communication. Sarah would ring her message publicly, sharing this moment with the community that had supported her. Word spread quickly. Villagers marked their calendars. The event became anticipated, not as an ending but as a celebration. A couple who'd maintained connection creatively was finally reuniting. That deserved recognition and joy. Local media asked to cover the event. Sarah agreed, hoping it might inspire other military couples. On April 15th, a surprisingly large crowd gathered near St Mary's Church. Over 100 people, villagers, press, military family support representatives, couples who'd adopted the bell communication method. The night was clear and mild, perfect for standing outside. Clara, Mrs Pembroke, Eleanor and others served hot chocolate and tea. At 11:45, Sarah emerged from the church. She'd already climbed to the bell tower and was ready to ring the midnight message. She addressed the crowd briefly. Thank you all for being here, for supporting me and James through this deployment, for turning our private love story into something that's helped other couples. James lands tomorrow at 2 p.m. After 6 months apart, we'll finally be together again. This is our last bell message until the next deployment, hopefully a long time from now. James will ring his ship's bell at 8 p.m. his time, which is midnight here. Then I'll ring my response. I'd love for you all to hear it. She returned to the bell tower. At exactly midnight across the Mediterranean, James rang his ship's bell. The pattern was longer than usual. Tom Fletcher, standing with the crowd, translated, "Last bells until home. Love you forever. Can't wait to hold you. Tomorrow we start forever." People smiled, some crying happy tears. Then Sarah's response rang out from Willowbrook's bell tower. Her message was equally long and heartfelt. Tom translated, "Counting hours. Love you more than words. Tomorrow everything begins. Bells brought us closer. Grateful for every ring. See you soon, my love." The bells fell silent. The crowd applauded. Sarah emerged from the church, crying and smiling simultaneously. People congratulated her, hugged her, wished her well. The midnight bells had served their purpose. Communication across distance, connection through creativity, love maintained through dedication. The next afternoon, the entire village seemed to gather at the small regional airport. James's flight was landing at 2 p.m. Sarah stood at the arrivals area, nervous and excited, surrounded by friends and neighbours. Clara stood with her, offering support. "He's almost here. After 6 months, he's almost here." "Are you nervous?" Clara asked. "Terrified. What if we've changed? What if it's awkward after so long apart?" "It won't be," Clara assured her. "You've been communicating every single day. You've stayed connected. This is just the next step." The arrivals board showed James's flight had landed. Sarah could barely breathe. People started emerging from arrivals. Then, there he was. Chapter 4, Reunion and Reflection. James was tall and lean in his naval uniform, looking tired from travel but scanning the crowd eagerly. When he spotted Sarah, his whole face lit up. Sarah ran to him. They met in the middle of the arrivals hall, embracing so tightly it seemed they'd never let go. People around them applauded. James lifted Sarah off her feet, spinning her. Then he set her down and they just stood there, foreheads touching, both crying and laughing simultaneously. "You're really here," Sarah kept saying. "You're really here." "I'm really here," James confirmed. "I'm home. I'm with you. It's over." They kissed, and the crowd, respectful but watching, applauded again. Clara felt tears on her own cheeks. This was what the bells had been about. This moment, this reunion. James noticed the crowd and seemed surprised. "Why are all these people here?" "They're here for you, for us," Sarah explained. "The whole village supported us through this. They solved the mystery of the bells. They protected our story. They cheered us on. They wanted to welcome you home." James looked around at the gathered villagers and visiting press. "Thank you, all of you. You have no idea what those bell messages meant to me. Knowing Sarah was there every night, knowing our connection was being celebrated, not hidden. Thank you." People came forward to shake his hand, to welcome him home, to congratulate them both. James was gracious and warm with everyone, though Clara could see he just wanted to be alone with Sarah. After about 20 minutes, they made their exit, driving away to finally have privacy. The village returned to normal, or at least a new normal. The bells no longer rang at midnight, but people still talked about them, still told the story to visitors. St. Mary's Church saw increased tourism from people wanting to see where the famous bell communications had taken place. Reverend Peters gave tours, explaining the bell system and the story behind it. In May, Sarah and James did a formal interview for a military magazine. They talked about their relationship, about the deployment, about discovering bell communication. James explained what it had been like on his side, convincing his commanding officer to let him ring the ship's bell every night, racing to be there at exactly 8 p.m, finding quiet moments to translate Sarah's responses. "The bells became my anchor," James said. "Something to look forward to every single day. Proof that Sarah was there, waiting, loving me despite the distance. And knowing that our creative solution had inspired other couples made it even more meaningful. We weren't just maintaining our own relationship, we were helping others maintain theirs." The wedding approached quickly. Sarah and James decided to incorporate bells into the ceremony. Instead of traditional wedding bells, they'd ring a message in Morse code as they exited the church. They taught their wedding party the code so everyone could translate it. Just Married would ring out in dots and dashes for anyone listening. The wedding was held on June 21st at St. Mary's Church, appropriately, given the church's role in their relationship. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah wore a simple, elegant gown. James looked handsome in his dress naval uniform. Their vows referenced their bell communications, their long-distance perseverance, their creative love. After the ceremony, as they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, James and Sarah climbed to the bell tower together. There, with the whole wedding party and guests gathered outside, they rang their message together. "Just Married," echoed across Willowbrook in Morse code patterns. People who'd followed their story translated enthusiastically. Cheers erupted. The reception was held at the community centre. The whole village came, along with James's Navy friends, Sarah's teaching colleagues, and family from elsewhere. During speeches, Tom Fletcher talked about discovering the Morse code pattern, about helping solve the mystery, about being moved by young love finding creative ways to endure. Clara spoke about the impact of Sarah and James's story on the village. "You reminded us that romance and dedication still exist, that young people today are just as capable of profound love as any previous generation. You showed us that creativity and persistence can overcome distance and difficulty, and you invited us into your story, which was a gift to this community." James's commanding officer, who'd flown in for the wedding, spoke about the Bell Communications Programme's success. Dozens of military couples are now using this method. The Navy has officially recognised it as a morale programme. Sarah and James, your love story has provided comfort and connection to families across our service. Thank you for that contribution. As evening arrived and the reception continued, Clara stood outside with Mrs. Pembroke and Eleanor, looking at the church where it had all begun. From mysterious midnight bells to a wedding celebration, Mrs. Pembroke reflected. Who could have predicted this when we first heard those strange patterns in January? Love finds a way, Eleanor said. And sometimes the way is unusual and beautiful. Over the summer, life in Willowbrook settled into new rhythms. Sarah and James lived in Sarah's cottage, which they renovated together. James found work at a local tech company while waiting for his next deployment. Sarah continued coordinating the military bell program and started a Morse code class at the community centre for anyone interested. The class was surprisingly popular. Teenagers thought Morse code was retro cool. Elderly residents enjoyed reconnecting with a skill from their youth. Parents learned it alongside children as a fun family activity. The village became known not just for the bell story, but as a place where traditional communication skills were valued and taught. In August, Clara organised a celebration at the Honeyed Leaf, a bell story anniversary marking 8 months since the midnight bells first rang. Sarah and James attended, along with many of the villagers who'd been part of solving the mystery. They shared memories, laughed about the wild theories people had developed, and reflected on how a simple idea had grown into something meaningful. "I never imagined that ringing bells would lead to all of this," Sarah said. "A wedding, a military program, teaching Morse code, becoming part of village history. It was just supposed to be a way for James and me to stay connected." "The best stories often start that way," Clara replied, "with something simple and sincere that touches people and grows naturally." In September, James received orders for his next deployment, 9 months starting in January. Sarah's face fell when she heard, but James took her hand. "We know how to do this now. We have the bells if we need them. We have the village supporting us, and we know that no matter how long I'm gone, we'll find our way back to each other. The bells worked once. They'll work again if we need them." Sarah nodded, trying to smile. "At least this time people will know what the midnight ringing means. No mystery, just connection." "Though I rather liked being mysterious," James joked. "Made me feel like a spy." The village, hearing about the upcoming deployment, rallied immediately. Offers of support poured in. Mrs. Pembroke offered to check on Sarah regularly. Lily promised weekly care packages of baked goods. Emma set up a book club to keep Sarah socially engaged. The community had watched Sarah endure one deployment. They were determined to support her through the next one. In October, Sarah and James made a decision. They'd use the bells again during the deployment, but differently this time. Instead of every night, they'd ring messages once a week, Sunday nights at midnight. "It'll be something to look forward to," Sarah explained. "A weekly ritual rather than a nightly requirement. That way it stays special without becoming overwhelming." They announced this plan to the village. People seemed pleased. The mystery was gone, but the romance remained. In November, as the holidays approached, Sarah and James began preparing for their first Christmas as a married couple, and their last Christmas together before deployment. They volunteered for community activities, spent time with family, and created memories to sustain them through months apart. The village included them in everything, aware that James would soon be gone. At the Thanksgiving community dinner, James stood to speak. "Sarah and I want to thank everyone here. When I deployed last year, I was just her boyfriend, someone most of you didn't know, but you supported her. You helped solve the bell mystery with kindness rather than judgment. You celebrated our reunion. You came to our wedding. You've made us feel truly part of this community. When I deploy again in January, I'll be leaving knowing that Sarah has a whole village looking after her. That means everything to a service member. So thank you for welcoming me, for caring about us, for being the kind of community that makes hard things bearable." People applauded, some wiping tears. Willowbrook had always been close-knit, but the bell story had strengthened those bonds further. December brought preparations for James's deployment. Medical appointments, paperwork, briefings. Sarah tried to stay positive, but Clara could see the strain. One afternoon, Sarah came to the Honeyed Leaf looking exhausted. "I know this is necessary. I know it's his job, but I already miss him and he hasn't even left yet." "That's natural," Clara said gently. "You're pre-grieving the separation. But Sarah, you've done this before. You know you can survive it. And this time you have experience and support and proven methods. It'll still be hard, but you're stronger than you were." "I hope you're right," Sarah said. "I keep telling myself, 9 months, it's finite. He will come home." On January 3rd, the village gathered again at the airport for James's departure. The mood was sombre but supportive. Sarah clung to James until the final boarding call. 9 months, he said, holding her face in his hands. Then I'm home and we start trying for the life we want. House, maybe kids, definitely a big dog. All of it. 9 months, Sarah repeated. I'll ring the bells every Sunday at midnight. And I'll ring back 15 minutes later from wherever I am, same as before, our connection across distance. They kissed goodbye. James boarded. Sarah watched until his plane took off, tears streaming but face determined. Clara stood beside her, offering silent support. That Sunday night, January 7th, the bells rang at midnight for the first time since April. The pattern was simple. Love you, stay safe. The village, mostly asleep, heard the familiar sound. Some smiled in their dreams. Mrs. Pembroke made tea and sent good thoughts. The midnight bells were back, but this time everyone understood. Not mystery. Love, not questions. Answers. Over the following weeks, the Sunday midnight bells became a village ritual again. People set their clocks by them. Oh, it's Sunday. Sarah's ringing to James. Children asked their parents about the bells and learned about long-distance love and creative communication. The church received inquiries from other communities wanting to start similar programs. In February, Sarah started a support group for military spouses. 6 other women in the region had partners deployed. They met weekly at the Honeyed Leaf, sharing challenges and strategies, supporting each other. Clara provided free tea and a welcoming space. The group called themselves the Bell Ringers, in honour of Sarah and James's story. In March, the Bell Communications for Military Families programme reached a milestone, 100 couples now using the method. Sarah was featured in a documentary about military family resilience. She talked about the bells, about community support, about finding creative solutions to difficult separations. The documentary aired nationally and inspired even more couples to try bell communication. In April, 1 year after James's first return, the village held a bell anniversary celebration. It marked a full year since the mystery was solved, since James came home, since the wedding. Sarah rang a special message at the celebration. 1 year of mysteries solved and love celebrated. People cheered. The bells had become part of Willowbrook's identity. As spring turned to summer, Sarah's spirits improved. She was halfway through the deployment. She'd found her rhythm: work, Morse code classes, support group, weekly bell messages, community involvement. James was safe and communicating regularly. The hardest part was behind her. In 5 more months he'd be home. In June, on their first wedding anniversary, Sarah and James arranged a special bell message. At noon, a different time from their usual midnight communications, both rang messages simultaneously from their locations. Sarah at Willowbrook Church, James from his ship. The messages were the same: 1 year married, forever to go. The village gathered to hear Sarah's message. It was romantic and public, a celebration of love enduring. Clara thought about how much had changed in 18 months. Mysterious midnight bells had led to a wedding, a military programme, enhanced community bonds, and ongoing inspiration for couples everywhere. All from one couple's creative persistence. In July, Sarah received news. James's deployment was extended by 1 month due to operational needs. Instead of returning in September, he'd be home in October. Sarah was disappointed but philosophical. 1 more month, after 8 months already completed. What's 1 more? I can do this. The village rallied again, offering extra support for the extended separation. In August, something unexpected happened. Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She and James had talked about starting a family, but thought it would happen after his return. Apparently, their brief holiday visit in December had resulted in conception. Sarah was thrilled and terrified. She'd be giving birth around the time James returned. Would he make it home in time? She rang a special bell message that Sunday. Important news, call when possible. James called the next day through official channels. When Sarah told him about the baby, he cried with joy. I'll be there, I promise. Even if I have to swim home, I'll be there for the birth. The village celebrated Sarah's pregnancy enthusiastically. Gifts poured in. Mrs. Pembroke organised a baby shower. Lily made elaborate baby-themed pastries. Emma created a nursery library with classic children's books. The community wrapped Sarah in support, determined to help her through the final months of pregnancy while James was away. Sarah's Sunday Bell messages changed tone, updating James on the pregnancy, sharing milestones, counting down to both his return and the baby's arrival. In September, as Sarah entered her third trimester, the village became even more protective. Someone always checked on her daily. Dr. Matthews monitored her carefully. Sarah's support group rallied, sharing advice about pregnancy and preparing for solo newborn care if James couldn't make it home in time. Sarah remained optimistic. James will be here. I know it. He won't miss this. Chapter 5. The Reveal and Resolution. In late September, Sarah went into labour 3 weeks early. Dr. Matthews rushed her to the hospital. The village mobilised immediately. Mrs. Pembroke called everyone. Within hours, a dozen villagers were in the hospital waiting room. Clara sat with them, hoping desperately that James would somehow know, somehow make it home. Labour progressed quickly. Sarah was frightened without James, but determined. The nurses were supportive. Mrs. Pembroke held her hand. And then, just as Sarah was being wheeled to delivery, there was a commotion in the hallway. A man in naval uniform, travel-worn and exhausted, rushed toward them. "Sarah, I'm here." James. He'd made it. Sarah burst into tears of relief and joy. When did you... Emergency leave. As soon as you went into labour, the Navy expedited everything. I've been travelling for 30 hours straight. But I'm here. I'm not missing this. He grabbed her hand and they went into delivery together. 3 hours later, Clara and the others in the waiting room heard the news. A healthy baby girl, 7 pounds, both mother and baby doing well. James emerged, looking exhausted but radiantly happy. "We have a daughter. She's perfect. Sarah's perfect. Everything's perfect." People hugged him, congratulated him, cried happy tears. Another chapter in the Bell story. This one the sweetest yet. The next day, Sarah and James introduced their daughter to visitors. They'd named her Belle, French for beautiful, but also an obvious reference to the bells that had kept them connected. Belle Sarah Morrison, James said proudly, named for her mother and for the bells that helped us survive separation. The village was charmed. Little Belle, born from love, maintained through creative persistence. James's emergency leave lasted 2 weeks, enough time to help Sarah adjust to motherhood before he had to return to finish his deployment. Those 2 weeks were precious. James changed diapers, did middle-of-the-night feedings, supported Sarah through recovery. And the village supported them both, bringing meals, offering childcare for brief breaks, celebrating this new family. When James had to leave again, it was even harder than before. But he'd met his daughter. He'd seen Sarah through delivery. And he only had 3 more weeks of deployment remaining. 3 weeks, he told Sarah at the airport. Then I'm home for good for a while. Home to you and Belle, our little family. During those final 3 weeks, Sarah's Sunday Bell messages changed again. Now they included updates about Belle, her first smile, her feeding schedule, her resemblance to James. Sarah would hold Belle while ringing the bells, introducing daughter to the method that had kept her parents connected. Clara found this incredibly touching when Sarah shared photos. On October 28th, James came home for good, at least until his next deployment in 2 years. The village gathered at the airport again, this time with welcome home signs and balloons. Sarah brought 3-week-old Belle, dressed in a tiny navy onesie. When James saw his daughter in person for the second time, he cried, "She's grown so much already." "You missed 3 whole weeks," Sarah teased gently. "But you're home now. We're together. Our family is complete." They drove home to their cottage, which the village had decorated with welcome home banners. That evening, the whole village gathered for an impromptu celebration on the green. James held Belle, introducing her to everyone who'd supported Sarah through pregnancy and supported them both through deployments. During the celebration, Reverend Peters suggested something. "James, Sarah, you started something special with those midnight bells. You helped other couples. You brought this community together. You reminded us all about creative love. Would you be willing to ring one final message tonight? A closing to this chapter of your story?" Sarah and James looked at each other and agreed. That night at midnight, they climbed the bell tower together, James holding bell, Sarah preparing to ring. The village gathered outside the church to listen. At exactly midnight, Sarah rang her message. Tom Fletcher translated for those who couldn't decode it themselves. The bells brought us together. The bells kept us connected. The bells brought us home. Thank you for listening. This is our final message. Not goodbye, but thank you. The bells fell silent. Then James rang a response, his first time ringing Willowbrook's bells. From all of us, Sarah, James and Belle, thank you, Willowbrook. Thank you for caring. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for turning our mystery into your story. We are forever grateful. The crowd erupted in applause. People wiped tears. Sarah and James emerged from the church with Belle, and the village surrounded them with love and celebration. The midnight bells had served their purpose completely now. Mystery solved, love sustained, family created, story completed. In November, Clara reflected on the entire Bell story. From January's first mysterious ringing, through Sarah's perseverance through separation, James's deployments, their wedding, Belle's birth, and now their complete family. It had been a journey that transformed from mystery to romance, to inspiration to completion. And the village had been part of every step. The Bell Communications for Military Families programme continued growing. Other couples kept using the method. But for Sarah and James, the midnight bells were finished. They'd served their purpose beautifully. Now Sarah and James could focus on raising Belle, building their life together, enjoying the peace of reunion. In December, as the year ended, the village held a New Year's Eve celebration. Clara looked around at the gathered community. So much had changed in 12 months. Mysterious bells had revealed love. Investigation had revealed romance. Publicity had revealed inspiration. And a young couple's creative connection had revealed what community could be when it supported rather than judged, when it celebrated rather than criticised. Sarah and James attended with Belle, now 2 months old. People gathered around to admire the baby and congratulate the parents. At one point, Sarah found Clara and hugged her. Thank you for everything, for investigating with kindness, for protecting our story, for supporting us through everything. You and this village gave us the space to love creatively. That's a gift. You gave us a gift too, Clara replied. You showed us that young love can be dedicated and persistent, that creativity and romance still exist, that mysteries aren't always sinister. Sometimes they're beautiful. You enriched this community, Sarah. You and James both. As midnight approached on New Year's Eve, the village gathered outside. Traditional New Year's bells would ring, not in code, just celebration. But before the official midnight bells, Sarah and James had requested one thing. At 11:59, they climbed to the bell tower one last time. At exactly midnight, as the new year arrived, they rang together. Not a Morse code message, but a simple, joyful celebration. The bells pealed across Willowbrook, welcoming the new year, celebrating love and family and community. And in that moment, the whole mystery came full circle. From mysterious midnight patterns to understood communication to final celebration, from separation to reunion, from 2 people to 3, from questions to answers. The bells had told a complete story, one that Willowbrook would remember and cherish for generations. As the year turned and celebrations continued, Clara thought about all the mysteries she'd witnessed in this village. Each one had taught something important. Margaret's snow days taught about purposeful endings. Dorothy's windows taught about creating beauty in difficulty. Edmund's ice taught about dedication to craft. Thomas's books taught about passion and principles. And now Sarah and James's bells taught about creative persistence in love. These weren't really mysteries at all, Clara realised. They were stories of people finding meaning, making connections, honouring what they valued. The mystery was just the initial confusion before understanding arrived. Once you understood the why behind the what, every mystery became a human story worth celebrating. In January, life continued in its new patterns. No midnight bells. But Sarah started teaching Morse code at the primary school, showing children how to communicate in creative ways. James found work he enjoyed. Belle grew and thrived. The village moved forward, carrying the Belle story as part of its collective memory. The church installed a small plaque in the bell tower. In honour of Sarah and James Morrison, whose creative love connected across distance through these bells 2026. And in honour of all military couples who find unique ways to stay connected. May these bells always represent persistence, creativity, and love. Visitors to Willowbrook often asked to see the famous bell tower. Reverend Peters would give tours, telling the story of mysterious midnight patterns that turned out to be love letters in Morse code. People found it romantic and inspiring. Some took up Morse code themselves, others just appreciated the story of young love persevering. In February, Clara received a letter from a couple in America. They'd read about the Willowbrook bells. They'd adopted the method during a deployment. Now they were expecting their first baby and wanted to name her Belle, after Sarah and James's daughter, after the bells that had inspired them. "Your village's story saved our relationship," the letter said. "When we were struggling with separation, we read about the bells and decided to try it. It worked. We stayed connected. Thank you." Clara shared the letter with Sarah and James. They were moved to tears. Their private love story had rippled outward in ways they'd never imagined, helping couples they'd never meet, inspiring hope in strangers, creating a legacy beyond their own relationship. "That's what the bells meant all along," Sarah said softly. "Not just connection between us, but connection between everyone. The bells brought people together." As winter turned to spring and life continued its rhythms, the bell story faded from daily conversation, but remained part of Willowbrook's identity. Tour guides mentioned it. Children learned about it in school. New residents heard the tale from long-time villagers. It became part of the village's fabric, a story about love, creativity, community, and persistence. A mystery that became a lesson. And Clara, serving tea and listening to stories as she always did, carried the memory of those midnight bells. The way they'd sounded mysterious at first, then meaningful, then celebratory. The way they'd connected not just Sarah and James, but an entire community. The way they'd proved that sometimes the best stories are the ones we don't understand at first, but come to cherish once we do. Thank you for visiting Willowbrook tonight and sharing Sarah and James's story. Sometimes what seems mysterious is actually beautiful once we understand it. Sometimes creative persistence is more powerful than any conventional method. Sometimes love finds unique ways to bridge impossible distances. And sometimes a community's support makes all the difference in helping that love survive. May you carry the knowledge that creativity and dedication can overcome obstacles, that mysteries often hide beauty rather than danger, that staying connected requires imagination and effort, and that community support transforms difficult situations into manageable ones. Rest well, dear friend. Until we meet again at the Honeyed Leaf, good night.